Now joining me, John Fetterman. He recently won a very interesting contested primary in Pennsylvania for lieutenant governor. He's of course heading to the general election. John, welcome to the TYT network.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. John, you got a fascinating story. First of all, you beat the incumbent in the primary, Mike Stack. First obvious question is, how'd you do that?
Well, I mean, I think I like to think we just ran a really hard campaign. We went out and did a lot of work and just ran on the issues. And Pennsylvania has 67 counties, and we were committed to getting out and visiting as many of those as we possibly could. We ran on good, solid, progressive values, and just we're really honored with the outcome. We finished first by a good margin.
Bernie Sanders wound up endorsing you, but so here's the, to me it's not a paradox, but what the mainstream media will consider a paradox. Pennsylvania voted for Trump, here you are endorsed by Bernie Sanders, and you wind up winning big time. Now I grant it's a Democratic primary, but what's going on in the state of Pennsylvania that they're so excited about a progressive like you?
Well, I think it's mostly about big core values, like looking out for organized labor, like looking out for healthcare, like looking out for public education, looking out for environmental issues. And at the end of the day, that's what really matters. And those kind of more universal themes, and we really focused on those. And if you want to call me a progressive, great. But I like to think our campaign is about all those issues, and that message resonated. And Pennsylvania is a very diverse state. You've got Center City, Philadelphia, perhaps the single most, I think it's plus 85 Clinton, and then you have some ruby red counties. And our message throughout this race has always been every county, every vote. And it's not about turning some ultra conservative county blue, but it's about closing these margins and making the case to every voter that is persuadable that we in our party is offering the best policy options and the best alternative to what's out there.
So you have a super interesting life story, even before you became Mayor of Braddock, but when you became Mayor of Braddock, it became even more fascinating. So walk me through it. So you had two teenage parents, you wind up playing for the Detroit Lions, you got a restaurant that Anthony Bourdain came to. What happened?
Well, no, I mean, I didn't play for the Lions, but I do live above a restaurant downstairs in. I do live above a restaurant that Anthony Bourdain visited. In fact, he was about a year ago that visited, and of course, like millions of others, was saddened by his loss. However, we live across the street from a steel mill. It's in an old converted car dealership. And that's where the restaurant gets its name, Superior Motors. And from a community of Braddock that did not have a functioning restaurant within its borders for the last 35 years, now Superior Motors was named one of the top 10 best new restaurants in America by Food and Wine magazine. So it's really just been about trying to restore a measure of prosperity to Braddock, but it's much more emblematic of what happened to a lot of industrialized communities and parts of the country, especially out here in southwestern Pennsylvania, and taking that message all across Pennsylvania that seems to be resonating, and not focusing on labels, and really just focusing on overriding concepts that resonate with the most people.
So it says in your bio that you quit your job to join AmeriCorps. So what was that job, and why did you take such a bold action?
Yeah, well, I was an underwriter for a risk management company, and when I was coming out of business school, I just thought I had a couple different life experiences happen to me. My best friend died in a car accident, and that forced me to reevaluate my life and my priorities. And I'm like, wow. And then I decided I wanted to join Big Brothers Big Sisters, and I was paired up with a little who was 8 years old, which is the same age as my son is right now, our oldest child. And his father had just died from AIDS, and his mother was in the process of dying from AIDS. And that really kind of fried my circuits. And I decided I wanted to make my life about working to push back against the enormous inequality that we have in the society. And I joined AmeriCorps, and I was placed here in Pittsburgh, teaching GED classes to young mothers and young fathers. And that's how I ended up here in southwestern Pennsylvania.
How'd you decide to run for mayor?
Well, two of my students, here as a GED program instructor, were gunned down over the course of a couple of weeks apart, and I decided I wanted to change that. I was just kind of overwhelmed with my options at the moment. I couldn't really do anything about the circumstances on the ground here as a program director, and I ran for mayor, and I won that first election by 1 vote, and that was back in 2005. And I've been elected to 4 subsequent terms. And then the kind of electoral culmination of that 1 vote was, of course, winning the primary for lieutenant governor here in Pennsylvania.
That is amazing every vote apparently does count. That brings us to
every vote, absolutely.
That brings us to John Fetterman and his success in his career. So when you took over, you decided that you were going to get a tattoo every time something happened. What was that?
Yeah, these were the dates when we lost people through violence in our community, and the first one was about 2 weeks after I was elected. And the thing that I'm most proud of that we've accomplished during my time as mayor is we went 5.5 years without the loss of life through violence in our community. And so I would just put them on my arm. I don't know if your viewers can see those right there. But yeah, so it's really just about acknowledging the loss and that these aren't just some random news story that someone just would see on on the line or on TV at night. There were people behind these events, and they left behind families that missed them very much, and just the ongoing tragedy of gun violence and violence in general in our society.
John, are those the names of the people who died?
No, those are the actual dates when it occurred.
I see. And so how in the world did you get a community that was suffering this significant violence to get to a point where there wasn't any killings for 5.5 years? What worked?
Well, early on, back in 2006, we understood the importance of having a community-based police force. And a lot of the issues that are roiling I'm sure many of your viewers have heard the name Antoine Rose. Well, that happened just a few communities over here from where we live, and perfecting a community policing technique was immediately one of our priorities in terms of having officers on the force that understood that an officer's most powerful weapon, most potent weapon, is his or her discretion. It's not their firearm or their taser, it's their discretion. And you look at all of these unfolding tragedies over the years, and you think how things could have turned out much differently if the officer just exercised a higher level, a better level of discretion. And we created a lot of opportunities for our young people and created a police force that residents embraced and didn't see as an occupying force. And we've been successful thus far, and I'm proud of that accomplishment. And I like to think that being ahead of the game, in front of the conversation, the importance of true community policing here, particularly in a community of color. Braddock is about 80%. Excuse me, Braddock is about 80% African American.
Yeah, that's an amazing track record. So, what is it that you want to get accomplished as lieutenant governor?
Well, lieutenant governor is a really, I think, in my opinion, has been a really underutilized office here in the state. And one of the most important things that the lieutenant governor's responsibility is to chair the board of pardons. And I very much would like to, make that about creating as much reforms in the criminal justice system here in Pennsylvania, and working with local district attorneys and working on streamlining the pardons process here in Pennsylvania. as well as just being an advocate for a lot of other things that we as progressives care about here in Pennsylvania. And I think the role in the office, having a statewide platform, being number 2 in charge here across Pennsylvania, affords enormous opportunity to push an inclusive, progressive agenda for the party and for the people of Pennsylvania.
So I want to make sure that we get the website, and it's johnfetterman.com, and
Yep.
there's your links for donations and volunteers. And I imagine that, given your background, you use those volunteers well to get out the vote and to educate people about where you stand. Real quick, we have about 30 seconds left. You risked impeachment to make sure that you presided over a same-sex marriage.
Yeah. Back in Pennsylvania, well, in Pennsylvania, it was still illegal in 2013, and there was a register of wills in Montgomery County that began issuing same-sex weddings. And I said, look, bring them out here. I'll solemnize them. So a couple here in Allegheny County got a license, and I performed the first and ultimately the only same-sex wedding by a state official here in Pennsylvania in 2013, facing the threat of legal sanctions from then Governor Corbett. And I was proud to do it. And since then, I've officiated dozens and dozens of same-sex weddings. And I did it simply because it was the right thing to do. And it's embarrassing that we as a country ever discriminated or treated anyone in that manner. And I'm glad we do have marriage equality, but with the Supreme Court in jeopardy as it is, we know so much is at stake now.
All right, John Fetterman, running for Lieutenant Governor in Pennsylvania. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Oh, hey, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on your show.